In 2019, airports moved 4 billion passengers and 60 million tons of cargo, generating multi-trillion economic output. Aviation supported 65 million jobs, contributing $2.7 trillion to GDP through systemic economic exposure. Yet the largest airport by land area serves fewer passengers than many European capitals, revealing structural inefficiency at scale. In this video, we break down airport scale, revenue mechanics, and geopolitical leverage behind global aviation infrastructure. Modern airports function as integrated economic zones, combining aviation operations, logistics platforms, and commercial real estate portfolios. At major hubs, up to 45% of revenue comes from retail leases, parking concessions, and institutional cargo infrastructure exposure. This diversification transforms airports from transport utilities into hybrid infrastructure corporations with complex cash flow structures. Terminal megastructures reflect that economic shift, measured in millions of square meters and governed by throughput efficiency metrics. Istanbul Airport's main terminal spans 1.4 million square meters, while Dubai's Terminal 3 reaches 1.7 million square meters. That scale exceeds the Pentagon multiple times, enabling annual capacity above 80 million passengers per terminal system. But terminal size alone does not determine throughput. Runway configuration ultimately defines slot capacity and structural revenue ceilings. Most runways range between 2.4 and 3.9 kilometers, balancing aircraft performance, land cost, and compliance. At high-altitude airports, thinner air reduces engine thrust and lift, increasing takeoff distance and infrastructure cost per departure. Camdo Bamda once built a 5.5-kilometer runway, absorbing higher construction and maintenance expenditure to offset altitude limitations. Today, Moscow's Zhukovsky operates a 5.4-kilometer runway, enabling heavy aircraft testing and specialized long-haul operations. Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson processed over 110 million passengers in 2019, generating massive regional economic exposure. That traffic volume generated billions in direct airport revenue, supporting tens of thousands of institutional employment positions. Yet Atlanta spans just 19 square kilometers, revealing operational density that maximizes slot utilization and revenue extraction. By contrast, Denver International covers 135 square kilometers, providing long-term land banking for phased infrastructure expansion. Denver's vast footprint acts as long-term land banking, allowing phased infrastructure expansion without future land acquisition battles. Airports increasingly treat surrounding land as future economic reserves, supporting logistics parks, energy facilities, and real estate projects. Cargo hubs amplify that strategy by converting runway access into strategic supply chain leverage and higher-margin logistics contracts. Hong Kong International handled over 4.8 million tons of freight annually before the pandemic disrupted global cargo throughput. Land reclamation expanded its footprint to 12.5 square kilometers, with a third runway system adding long-term capacity headroom. At one point, the airport represented more than 7% of Hong Kong's entire built-up land area, concentrating logistics within dense urban land use. Memphis International reclaimed the cargo crown in 2020, powered by FedEx's overnight logistics superhub operating model. Express cargo models generate higher revenue per ton through time-sensitive premium contracts and integrated distribution networks. Night operations, slot flexibility, and customs efficiency often determine cargo profitability more than terminal aesthetics. Airports that dominate freight flows effectively anchor regional manufacturing and e-commerce ecosystems, reinforcing structural trade dependence. Control of cargo corridors translates directly into trade competitiveness and national economic resilience, strengthening strategic market leverage. Some cities solve capacity limits not by expanding one airport, but by constructing integrated multi-airport infrastructure systems. London operates 6 commercial airports that processed over 180 million passengers in 2019, forming a coordinated aviation system. That volume rivals entire nations and creates layered redundancy across multiple airline business models, reinforcing operational resilience. Together, London's airports cover more than 30 square kilometers, forming a distributed aviation network across Greater London. This decentralization reduces congestion risk while supporting low-cost, legacy, and long-haul carriers, diversifying traffic flows. Multi-airport systems diversify revenue exposure and hedge against airline bankruptcies or route concentration, reinforcing financial stability. Globally, hub airports invest billions in capital expenditure cycles that span decades rather than fiscal years, reflecting long-term commitments. A single new runway can cost $5 to $15 billion once land acquisition, environmental mitigation, and rail links are included. Yet additional runway capacity can unlock tens of millions of annual passengers and billions in incremental GDP impact, boosting regional output. Airport economics therefore hinge on long-term traffic forecasts and geopolitical stability, shaping investment exposure and capital allocation decisions. Airlines choose hubs based on alliance connectivity, regulatory freedom, and market access rather than physical land area alone. That is why some of the busiest airports are not the largest geographically, reflecting operational intensity over territorial scale. Operational density, slot management, and air traffic coordination drive yield per square kilometer, maximizing infrastructure monetization efficiency. Airports are effectively high-value throughput machines, converting time, land, and infrastructure into economic velocity. The real power lies not in size, but in how efficiently that scale is monetized within complex infrastructure investment systems. The largest airport on Earth by official land area is Saudi Arabia's King Fahd International, an extreme case of territorial infrastructure capacity. Its designated area exceeds 776 square kilometers, making it larger than 23 sovereign states by territorial comparison. If ranked as a country by size, it would sit around 173rd globally, highlighting the magnitude of its territorial footprint. Yet it serves roughly 10 million passengers annually, placing it far below major global hubs in comparative structural throughput capacity. The enormous footprint originated during the Gulf War, when surrounding land was secured for large-scale military logistics infrastructure. Today, only 36.7 square kilometers are actively used for civilian aviation operations, leaving most of the land unused. The remaining land functions as strategic reserve, potential development zone, and geopolitical buffer within national infrastructure governance. Such land banking provides future expansion flexibility, reducing urban resistance and preserving long-term development capacity. It also reflects how airports serve dual civilian and military purposes, reinforcing strategic national infrastructure alignment. Large airfields integrate fuel storage, defense infrastructure, and emergency deployment capability, expanding institutional operational readiness. That dual-use dimension elevates airports beyond commercial enterprises, transforming them into strategic state infrastructure assets. Control of air gateways influences tourism flows, cargo security, and diplomatic mobility, reinforcing geopolitical leverage. Governments therefore treat major hubs as instruments of economic policy, projecting structural influence and soft power abroad. Infrastructure scale becomes leverage in trade negotiations and regional development planning, shaping long-term institutional positioning. Airports are not just transport nodes, they operate as sovereign economic platforms embedded within complex global infrastructure governance systems. As global travel rebounds, airport traffic is projected to surpass pre-2019 levels within this decade, restoring structural demand equilibrium. Industry forecasts expect passenger demand to double by 2040, driven by sustained emerging market expansion dynamics. That expansion requires trillions in cumulative infrastructure investment worldwide, intensifying capital allocation pressure. New terminals, additional runways, and digital air traffic management will redefine capacity ceilings, restructuring long-term infrastructure scalability. Airports increasingly integrate renewable energy systems and smart grid infrastructure, reducing long-term operating cost exposure. Some major hubs now generate significant portions of their electricity through on-site solar installations, strengthening energy resilience. Digitalization enhances throughput by optimizing gate allocation, predictive maintenance, and passenger flow analytics, improving structural efficiency. Efficiency gains translate directly into higher revenue per movement and improved asset utilization ratios, reinforcing financial performance. In financial terms, airports behave like infrastructure funds with stable cash flows and long concession revenue governance structures. Investors view them as defensive assets due to regulated pricing and diversified revenue streams, limiting volatility exposure. However, geopolitical shocks and pandemics expose the fragility of traffic-dependent income models, amplifying systemic revenue vulnerability. The next generation of airport design balances resilience, scalability, and capital efficiency, redefining long-term infrastructure sustainability. The largest airports are not merely vast pieces of land. They function as complex economic organisms within global trade systems. Their scale determines how fast goods move and how nations trade, shaping structural market integration across global economies. Understanding their true size means understanding how modern economies physically function, revealing systemic infrastructure dependence.